Okay, so this journal here is actually a continuation of Journal 31, so just keep on adding to that journal entry. So we're going to start off with a bell work here, and it says factor the GCF. So GCF is talking about the greatest common factor. So what is that saying is you're going to take out or factor out as much x's or as much of the numbers as possible. So in this case, there's an x squared here and there's an x here. That means we can pull out at least x to the first power out. Since the lowest power here is 1, I can pull out at least an x to the first power. Afterwards, I need to see how many I have left over, which is why I created this parentheses here. So in this case, this is x squared and this is x to the first power. There are two terms here, so I need to put two terms here. So I'm going to put that minus sign down. Oops, that black. So the minus sign comes down, and this is x squared, but I took out one x, so that means there's just one x left over. Now, I took out an x from this one as well, but that doesn't mean that there's a 0 here. Instead, we have to write a 1. So if you take everything from that term or that spot, you have to replace it with a 1 by default. Because if you were to redistribute, x times x gives you x squared, x times negative 1 will give you back the x. So make sure if you take everything off, you need to leave back a 1. And now we have factored out because I can't really take anything out of x and 1. They don't have anything in common. All right, in this one here, I see that there's a 2 and a 6. So 2 and 6 both have a multiple of 2. So if I were to remove a 2, I'd probably just have a 3 left in this one. But first, let's look at the x's. This is x to the third power, and that's x to the first power. That means I can at least remove one x. Now, I think that's it that I can remove, so I'm going to see what I have left over. So, just like before, there are two terms here, so I need to make sure I write two terms in my parentheses. I'm going to bring down the plus sign. So, I've removed this 2 already, so it's no longer there. And I moved an x, so now this is x squared. That's left over. And then this one, I removed a 2, so that means I'm dividing the 6 by 2, so that means a 3 is left over. And I've removed already an x, so this x is no longer there. And so it is 2x, x squared plus 3, and we have factored. Notice that x squared and 3 don't have anything in common that you can pull out. So you've already factored out or divided out all that you can. All right, so we're going to look at the second slide here and try practicing these factoring skills. Okay, so we're going to factor out these polynomials here. So it looks like I have part A has an x minus 5 and an x minus 5 on both of these. And so that's the beauty of it. If I notice that it's the same parentheses or the same factor on each side, I can try to pull this out. So I'm saying that I can take out x minus 5 since it's in both of the terms. So when I pull out x minus 5, I do leave some terms behind. Notice how there is 1, 2, 2 terms here. So when I create my parentheses, I need to know what to leave behind, right? What 2 terms I'm leaving behind. Now there's a plus sign here, so I need that plus sign. And in the first term, I removed this x minus 5, which means that I had left behind an x. So that means right here in the first spot, I need an x. So basically in this parentheses, I'm writing down what I left. And in the second term here, there was the x minus 5, which is removed, and I have left a 3. So now I need to put a 3 here. And notice now I've put everything into parentheses or factors, so I'm done factoring. And that's it. Let's try the next one here. So again, what I noticed in part B is that x plus 1 is in both of the terms. And so what I'm going to do is factor out x plus 1 and check out what I have left behind. And again, there are 2 terms here, so I need to make sure I have a binomial here or 2 terms here. And there's a minus sign this sign, so I need a minus sign here. Now, this one, when I removed the x plus 1, I did leave behind 2x squared. So I need to make sure that I write this in my parentheses, a 2x squared. And then in the second one here, I have removed x plus 1, adding, basically leaving the 5. So I have like a minus 5 here. And now I've put everything in parentheses, so I'm done factoring. All right, let's try out one more here where I don't have everything in like these nice parentheses here for you to just extract out. Let's see if we can create those parentheses ourselves. Okay, so let's talk about factoring cubes by grouping. So you'll notice here that most of the time when you're factoring cubes, you'll have like 4 terms or sometimes more. And so if you have more terms, well, you have to use this technique called grouping. And so there are 4 terms here, and what we're going to try to do is pair 2 up. You might have noticed in the previous problem, I was giving you binomials. So there's only 2 terms, which makes it easier to factor out stuff. But when you have 4 terms, what you have to do is pair 2 of them up into its own parentheses. Let me just say before you do this, make sure that the highest power, your polynomial is from the highest power to the lowest power, that it's in exponent order. So notice that this is third power, second power, first power, then constant. So it needs to be in this decreasing order, or else it is, you need to rearrange it. So that's really important that you make sure of that before you try to group. So when you're grouping here, let me push this to the side, there we go. So I'm gonna group the 2 highest ones together, and then I'm gonna group the 2 lowest ones together. And what I mean by high and low, I'm talking about the exponents. So these are the highest exponent, these are like the lowest exponents. And so in this case here, I have the x cubed inside and a 2x squared. So I'm gonna just try to factor this group first. And so I notice that the lowest power here is x squared, so that means I can pull out an x squared, but I leave 2 terms behind since there are 2 here. And so I'm going to drop down the minus sign, and this is x cubed, and I took out an x squared, so that means I have 1 x left behind. Now in this one here, I took out that x squared, so the only thing I left behind is the 2. And then I'm done factoring this first group. Now this group here, I have a 3 and a 6. This one doesn't have an x. So I need to take out this 3, which I will. So there's a plus sign, and then I'm going to extract a 3 out, or factor out a 3. But when I do that, I leave an x behind. And, well, this 6 here, if I divide out a 3, that means this 6 is now a 2. So take a look at what you just created. Notice how like you have x minus 2 and x minus 2 on both of them. That means you can factor out those x minus 2 like what we were doing in the last slide. And so if I take out an x minus 2, I leave behind something, right? I leave behind this x squared and this plus 3. So I need to write down an x squared and a plus 3. And now I have factored my polynomial. You'll be doing something similar to this in your project, so I will reiterate this on Monday when we are talking about solving for polynomials. But for now, we'll just talk about factoring. So what we're going to do next is we are going to be looking at some homework problems from packet 7, page 1. So if you want to turn to that packet page number, so page 1, I'm going to be looking at problems 6, 7, and maybe 8. All right, so this is packet 7, page 1, and here I have problem 6 here. I wanted to do this problem because you'll notice this one has a minus sign where you would have the middle when you were factoring. So first off, check if it's in decreasing order, like it's from highest power to lowest power, and it is. This is third power, second power, first power, and then constant. So it is in order, and now we're going to start by grouping. So I'm going to group up these 2 together. You want to group up the, oops, that's a weird parentheses. You want to group up the first 2 highest power and then the 2 lowest powers. And so now what we're going to do is see what we can factor out. So that's a 3, that's a 12. That means I can factor out a 3 at most. And then that's an x squared, that's an x cubed, and that's an x squared. So the least amount of x's I can bring out is x squared. And so in this case, I already took out this 3, I already took out an x squared, so I left behind an x. And this plus here needs to be dragged down. And then since you took out a 3, you're dividing this 12 by 3. And so you left behind a 4. And you took out an x squared, so you no longer have any x's in this second term. All right, so I'm done factoring out this one. Let's factor out this one. So notice there's a minus sign here, so I need to bring down this minus sign. And there's a 2 here, and that's an 8, so I definitely can factor out a 2. And then I would have an x left, and then 8 divided by 2 gives me a 4. And so this means, well, what is the sign that goes here? Typically, we would just drop down the sign as it is. If that's a minus sign, that would be a minus sign. But here's the issue. You've technically factored out a negative 2. So notice if you were to multiply negative 2 with x, you get negative 2x, which is what you want. But if you put a negative here, negative 2 times negative 4 gives you a positive 8, which is not what's here. Instead, what you have to do is switch this sign. So if you have a minus sign in front of your second parentheses, you need to flip the sign. So this sign needs to be a plus sign instead. And so negative 2 times 4, positive 4, gives you a negative 8, which is exactly what you want. Now from here, what we need to do is figure out what to factor out, which is the x plus 4. So since both of them have x plus 4, we're going to factor that out, but we leave 2 terms behind. So in this case, in this term, we have an x squared, so I'm going to write down an x squared here. And then in this term here, we have a 2 that we left behind, so I need to write a minus 2 here. So a minus 2. And then we are done factoring because I've put everything in parentheses. So that is it. All right, so in the next problem here, number 7, again, you make sure that they're in the exponents are in order, and they are. And then from here, we're going to put them in parentheses. So first 2 in parentheses, and then the last 2 in parentheses. And so what I notice immediately with the first parentheses is they have both a 5. So I'm going to extract out a 5, and that's an x cubed, and that's an x squared. So I'm going to take out an x squared, because that is like the lowest power that I can bring out. So I had to take that out. Now I need to know what I left behind. So this one, I took out the 5 and I took out an x squared. So that means I have at least one x left over. And then in this one here, notice how this that I took out is the same as this that is inside. So that means I have to leave behind a 1 because I took out everything. Now, in the next one here, it's kind of tricky, but I have an x plus 1 here. And notice that with this here, there's nothing in common with x and 1 except for 1. You can technically take a 1 out of this parentheses, right? It's not wrong. The only thing is that you can either think of it as extracting a 1 from both of them, or if you just think about it like this is a parentheses, I can't factor out anything, but there is always a number in front of something if it doesn't have a coefficient, so technically it's 1. So technically there's a 1 in front of this x plus 1. So what I'm trying to do is, because I really would like to factor out an x plus 1, so when I do, I notice that what I have left behind is these 2 terms, which is 5x squared and a positive 1. And so in this case, I have factored my polynomial, and so here is my answer. All right, I guess since we have some time here, let's squeeze in number 8. So I'll do number 8 here on the side. So number 8 is 2x cubed minus 12x squared plus 5x minus 30. And so when I'm solving out this problem here, I do need to group them. And so they're already in the exponents are already in order, so I'm going to put them in parentheses. And in this case, there's a 2 here and a negative 12. So I'm going to pull out a 2, and that's an x cubed and that's an x squared. So the lowest power I can bring out is x squared. And so from here, it looks like on this one here, I've taken out the 2, I've taken out the x cubed, so all I have left is just 1x. And in this one here, I've taken out the 2, So if you divide 2 by 12, you get a negative 6. And you've taken out an x squared, so you don't have any x's left in the second term. And in the next one here, I have a 5 and a 30. So 5 and 30 can both be divisible by 5, so I can extract the 5 out, which leaves behind an x and a minus 6, since 30 divided by 5 gives you 6. And so from there, I notice that these two are both x minus 6, so x minus 6 comes out. And what I have left behind is the 2x squared, and then the plus 5 that's on the other term. And that's it. That is my 2 factors. So I hope this helps with your homework. Make sure you do number 5 since I skipped that one. All right, I hope you guys have a great day.